So Kirk Schneider, PhD, is a leading spokesperson for the existential, humanistic, and existential integrative psychology, an adjunct faculty member at Saybrook University and former Teachers College, Columbia University, and a co-founder and current president of the award-winning Existential Humanistic Institute. He was also a 2022 candidate for president-elect of the American Psychological Association. And Dr. Schneider has authored and co-authored 15 books, including The Polarized Mind, The Depolarizing of America, and his latest book, Life Enhancing Anxiety, Key to a Sane World. So that's an amazing bio. And I also want to say, Kirk, how pleased we are at online events to be collaborating with the existential movement, which is a group of colleagues who really determined to bring the wisdom from the psychotherapy world to the rest of the world. And I know, Kirk, along with Emmy and other colleagues, you're putting a lot of energy and a lot of commitment into making that possible. And we're just so pleased at online events to be part of that movement of wisdom out into the wider world. So yeah, really pleased, Kirk, to be working together.
Well, first I want to say welcome from the world to our world here. And it does seem like we have quite international participation, which I'm very heartened by for this event. And thank you so much for the introduction, John, for the organization of this, and certainly my gratitude to Emmy and to the existential movement, and to my very cherished demonstration partners, Shlomit and Jason, whom I'll introduce momentarily, for participating in this, and for also Libby Traubman, who has been conducting Israeli-Palestinian dialogue groups for many decades, and for whom we thank for enlisting Shlomit and Jason for the demo that's upcoming. They have been part of those groups. So with that, I want to let you into my world a bit here at the beginning. Like many of you, I have long really struggled with how quickly conversations about religion, culture, and politics go downhill. They rapidly descend into three basic areas I've found. One is verbal flame throwing, where the dialogue partners, if you will, are just attacking each other. They're presuming all kinds of things about each other. They're imposing their views on each other. We see that all the time in media and politics, and probably in our neighborhoods, and often enough with family and friends. So verbal flame throwing. The second common response is just simply avoidance. And I've certainly engaged in this with friends, sometimes family, and in other situations, just simply avoid getting into issues. At least at the surface level, it's a lot easier, right? But nevertheless, these issues are still there, and they're often teeming with an underlying tension. The third common reaction, and I would call these reactions more than responses, is violence, emotional or physical violence. And of course, that is the most destructive and most worrisome for all of us. And I think that is what makes this event and the investigation of what makes these conversations go downhill so quickly, so urgent. So, interestingly enough, I found a clue to the answer to this question, not from psychology per se or from scientists, although I will get into that in a little bit. They've certainly contributed in a major way to answering this question of why these conversations go downhill so quickly. But I actually found it in the arts and humanities. And in particular, from arguably the most acclaimed writer of classic horror, who really knows this terrain, I would say. The most acclaimed author of classic horror since Poe, arguably, and that is H.P. Lovecraft. And he says in his essays about what scares us the most about how these classic horror books and films shake us so. In his book on supernatural terror, he states, "The oldest and strongest emotion of humankind is fear. And the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." I think he's really putting his finger on the pulse here. And if you think about classic horror books and films, and I did write a book about that called Horror and the Holy, Wisdom Teachings of the Monster Tale. You think about Frankenstein, Dracula, Alien, The Exorcist. I saw a film that was very distressing recently called Speak No Evil. Think about the role that the radically unknown plays in these films. Certainly the overt figures are scary, but it's that being on the edge, not being sure what they're going to do, what's going to happen next. The sense of being lost, of being abandoned, of being cut from the mothership of the routine and familiar. I think that is really critical here. And that's what Lovecraft and other horror writers are pointing to, is what happens when we veer off the safe and familiar and we're in this territory of the uncontained and the radically different and foreign. And again, think about how these figures in these stories are so different from what is safe and familiar to us. That's the basic meaning of the term deranged. And we actually have a lot of research to back this up. We can draw from attachment theory within psychodynamic thought, secure and insecure attachment, and what happens with the child when strangers come into view or when the caretaker acts very differently with them. It's like they drop off a cliff. We can draw from terror management theory and social psychology, which has talked about how death anxiety can move people to become more absolutist and rigid in their views, because death anxiety really represents the radically unknown in perhaps the most intense way. And we have some recent studies, such as from the Journal of Experimental Psychopathology, that looked at what seems to scare human beings the most. And they found it was the unknown, even more than death per se. And I think maybe they're talking about physical death. Because certainly there's an overlap between the radically unknown and death. So the radically unknown seems to be a driver of our deepest dreads, as well as perhaps our most dazzling possibilities, which we'll get into more. Some of this work derives from the genius, in my view, of Otto Rank, who was Freud's secretary for about 20 years and wrote a classic book that unfortunately pretty much cut him off from the psychoanalytic movement early on because it, I guess, was very threatening to classical Freudian theory because it addressed the earliest traumas of the human being. And that is it's captured in his book, The Trauma of Birth. In The Trauma of Birth, Rank homes in on that intense crucible that we all come out of, which is the birth process, and that intense shift between relative non-being and unity with the mother and with the cosmos to sudden abrupt being and chaos that we're thrown into. Heidegger talks about this too. We're thrown into the world. And so the question is, how do we all deal with this primary trauma? In this sense, we're all profoundly wounded. And I'm not saying it's all bad, but what I'm saying is there is a sense of groundlessness and helplessness at the core of the human condition that needs to be looked at here. And I don't think we look at it enough, and that these horror writers are getting to. That sense of floundering, if you think about the newborn. So, question is, how is this handled? You could argue, Rank argues, and I argue as well, that this crucible of birth is the template for virtually all future anxiety and trauma. I also think, and this is why I would not call it the trauma of birth, I call it the drama of birth, that there are elements of wonder and amazement in the birth process. It may start with this shock and overwhelm with chaos, but soon on the heels of that, the child seems to begin to be curious and wonder, look about. And at least that's what I experienced with my own son presiding at his birth. But I think it makes intuitive sense if we reflect on it. So so the question is, how are these polarities handled? Now, I would say that the traumatic part is a lot of what seems to be behind our terror, not only of the unknown, but of that which is different and foreign and feels uncontained because it deviates so much from what was safe and familiar and contained. And so I think that forms the template for really much of our future bigotry, prejudice, assumptions about the world, the kind of fear-based perspective that we're met with at birth that is often carried over generations to the parents, to the culture that we're born into. And so those folks and we, when we're born, too often in cultures like ours, erect defenses to avoid the sense of groundlessness and helplessness. And this is what terror management theory was getting at. We erect defenses to do everything we can to avoid any hint of that primal groundlessness and helplessness that we feel at the beginning. So we make ourselves, we give ourselves the illusion of power and control in very exaggerated forms often. We pump ourselves up to seem grandiose, above it all, above others. And of course, that can become very destructive in the forms of, in collective forms, such as tyranny or autocratic leaders. But it can also very much root itself at the individual level in terms of grandiosity, narcissism, or substances that make us feel invincible, etc. This is a major problem in our society, and I think it speaks directly to these uncomfortable conversations that we have about religion, politics, culture, that they trigger off this profound sense of groundlessness and helplessness. And if we just deal with them more at the external level, sort of the behavioral level, or even maybe cognitively changing thoughts, reconditioning, we risk rearranging deck chairs on a Titanic. We risk not getting to these deeper places in people that really reflect the primal uncomfort that we feel with each other on issues that make us feel so helpless, so insignificant and groundless, and that activate our defenses. So this brings us to the whole question of how are we met? How are we met by our caretakers? How are we met by the culture that greets us right from the beginning and ongoingly in our developmental years? And unfortunately, I don't think we're too good in our cultures. I think that's quite evident in terms of the destructiveness that we see, the civil strife, the political, racial polarizations that we see in our culture. That the wars, we're not too good at working with, at being given the tools, the equipment to deal with this primal terror of the unknown and that which is different. So that's basically what I and others who are working in dialogue groups like this, depth dialogues, are attempting to give people, admittedly quite belatedly, ideally, that those tools and equipment would be provided right from the beginning of our emergence on Earth. But they certainly need to be supplemented. And unfortunately, again, we're not generally very good with dealing with inner lives. So this is our modest attempt to try to help people develop some skills and tools to work with that primal anxiety that gets triggered when people have ideas, perspectives that shake us at our roots. And that is the basis for what I call the experiential democracy dialogue, which we're about to demonstrate in a few moments, which is a one-on-one approach that draws from my work as a trained moderator with Braver Angels, which is another terrific organization, grassroots organization that works with self-identified liberals and conservatives with living room conversations. But this experiential democracy dialogue is specifically one-on-one. I'm bringing a lot of my own therapeutic skills to the fore here, translating those to social contexts. So what I'm trying to help the dialogue partners do is to have some tool, some priming, so that they can humanize their conversations rather than coming at each other with labels and stereotypes and knee-jerk reactions that come from this primal terror that I was talking about. And the main tool that we're homing in on here is what we call in the existential humanistic community presence, what I call presence, which is the holding and illuminating of that which is palpably significant within oneself and between oneself and the other. So the cultivation of presence has a holding dimension, a kind of holding environment, as it's been called, where it can hold all kinds of contrasting and contradictory impulses, points of view, and an illuminating function where it's safe enough for people to begin to drop in and explore or reveal more of where they're coming from. And that's a lot of the problem here with these conversations. We jump into them much too quickly. We don't prime people or give them tools and skills to be more present to themselves and to the other and to otherness. And of course, the conversation's set up to go right downhill. So this is something I also call life-enhancing anxiety, which is the capacity to live with and make the best of the depth and mystery of existence. That's the sort of philosophical view. The more concrete definition of life-enhancing anxiety is a growing capacity to live on the edge of wonder and discovery, as opposed to terror and overwhelm, which is how we live our lives too often, I would say. And also a recognition that as long as we're not in the immediate radius of danger, I think this is really important for especially those of us in the mental health community to recognize. As long as we're not in the immediate radius of danger, we have a luxury that other people don't have who are in that immediate radius of danger. Some of us too here may be in that. But I think we need to not take that for granted. That is a space for a democratic process to take place. Because if you're in that immediate range of immediate danger, all bets are off, as far as I'm concerned. You're going to protect, you're going to do everything you can to survive. Protect yourself. Those defenses are going to go up in very powerful and often destructive ways. So what I'd like us to think about as we go along here too, especially those of you who are healers, who are in the mental health profession, is at what point does your role as healer end and your position as partisan begin? And maybe we can at least consider stretching that role as healer before we become partisan so that we can bring more healing to the world. And that has a lot to do with drawing from our own training. I mean, if we can't do it, who can? If we aren't specialized in holding the contrasts and contradictions of living and coexisting with those and making the best of those. And actually, as I say, that there can be a best there. The flip side of the terror of the chaos is the possibilities that can come up, the discoveries that can come up, the wonder. If we can't do it, who can? So with that introduction, I'd like to introduce again Shlomit and Jason, and they are going to represent by themselves, not from a particular party or group, but by themselves, two views and experiences on Zionism. Now, I know this is a quite charged issue for all of us at different levels. So I want to give an extra shout out to both Jason and Shlomit for participating in this particular dialogue, and really appreciate you both for your willingness to give us an example. And that's what this demo is, to give you, the audience, an example so that you can then draw from that and in the second part of this workshop, work with the six-phase model that I'm about to present, this experiential democracy dialogue. I want to also note that, as I understand it, Shlomit has a somewhat more critical perspective on Zionism, especially contemporary Zionism, than Jason does. And to give you just a working definition of Zionism that I took from the Oxford English Dictionary, originally it was a movement for the establishment of a Jewish nation in the region of Jerusalem, at that time called Palestine. Zionism is now concerned with the development and protection of Israel as a Jewish state and the encouragement of Jewish immigration. So with that, I am going to attempt to screen share. Oh, I didn't get a chance to screen share, actually. I was
You're
going
going to
to
work
over
through
that.
the slides, Kirk?
Yeah, let
Yeah,
me
great.
do it
Let's,
very quickly here.
great.
Okay, just give me a moment, please.
Yeah, let's just take our time with the technology. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I go to John, I go to
Just
slide.
play from start, right at the left-hand corner of your screen.
Right.
Do you see
Okay,
that? There it is. Great.
there
And
we are.
hopefully great. Thank you, Kirk.
Okay, so I want to really bring our attention to the ground rules. Those are critical for these conversations. Just quickly, I mean, you can read this, but quickly, this is all about coming from a place of genuine curiosity to the degree you can, rather than uh, attempting to impose your view on the other or coming from a place of presumption. It's also about really three pillars that I've drawn from Braver Angels, which is openness, curiosity, and respect. And if you don't respect the other's point of view, which is understandable in a number of ways, at the very least, respect the fact that they're willing to be vulnerable with you and engage in a dialogue. We ask the partners to speak from their own experience, so making I statements rather than representing any party or ideology. Um, you know, giving the space for the other partner to elaborate their perspective. So respect is really key here. And also being watchful of our nonverbals, nonverbal communication, you know, the rolling of the eyes, the heavy sighs that so often can come up when we're triggered by these conversations. So to try to stay as centered as possible and again, find that place of curiosity to the degree possible when you're with your partner. The first phase is a visualization phase, and I'm going to go over this with Shlomit and with Jason momentarily. But it's just about visualizing what it might be like before you even enter into the dialogue, what it might be like to engage with this person, their view. Immediate action come. This is something like in psychotherapy where we're looking at what's operating here before making a decision or moving in a given direction. First, we need to see what all is coming up mindfully without fixating on any one thing, but having a sense of the images and feelings and sensations, especially that associate with engaging in this other perspective, and then making room for a human being before you to the degree you can. Second phase is talking about the background. So again, these are humanizing. we're filling out the humanity of people as we go along here. And one of the most important aspects in filling out the humanity of a person in these conversations is finding out where they're coming from instead of jumping right in. We want to know the context. So, what was it like to grow up in light of the issue at hand? And especially, were there any critical incidents or formative events that relates to your particular perspective? And they have a chance to finally give their stance, elaborate it as mindfully and heartfully as possible to the other, and have the other reflect back what they heard and then correct it if there are gaps. This is a stereotypes exercise borrowed from Braver Angels, where the speaking partner identifies stereotypes negative toward them and then identifies the false and misleading aspects of the stereotypes and then nuggets of truth to the stereotypes. And each partner has a chance to do this, again, showing the fuller picture of where they're coming from. They get to ask a question of each other in the fifth phase and come from a place of curiosity rather than an answer in the question or fishing in the question, etc. And finally, a discovery results phase. What did you learn? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about the other and their perspective, your relationship with the other? And was there any potential for common ground? And it may not be with the issue. It may not have to do with the particular opinions each holds. It could have to do with something else, the backgrounds or something else that one relates to about the other. The point is, if we can achieve more of these conversations so that people will just be civil with one another, we've made a great stride. It doesn't mean that we have to all agree, but can we move toward what Arnie Mindell has called a deep democracy, where we live with contrast and contradiction? That's what the democratic ideal is about. Live and let live and learn from each other. And yes, be uncomfortable at times. That's part of living, full living. Okay, so with that, I am now going to orally go through these phases with Shlamita and Jason. So maybe you can set that up. Wesley, our fine tech. And
Just getting the screen. And then I think we're also, as a group, going to turn our cameras off. We're going to close the chat room as well, just so that we have that very quiet focus space to work in. So I can see the cameras going off. So if you here with us and you can just click that, the camera icon on your Zoom, that's great. And I'll do the same too. Okay, thank you.
okay, so Shlomit and Jason, if you could just take a moment to take a collective breath, full breath can be helpful, just to get centered here as we begin. And begin to turn inward. It may be helpful for you to close your eyes for a few moments here. And I'm going to now invite you to take a few moments to mindfully observe the thoughts and especially feelings, body sensations, and images that come up for you as you envision engaging with your partner and the issue that your partner holds. So just take a few moments to observe those, feel them, sense them, but without fixating on any one thing, just like you're watching objects floating down a river, getting a sense of what's operating on you as you move into this journey. Okay, now I'd like you to slowly make the transition. You can keep your eyes closed if it's helpful in staying inward, but make the transition now to seeing if you can clear a space for the human being that is before you. Your partner as a human being, as a fuller person, as a person with their own story, their own wounds, their own struggle, the many sides of Shlomit and of Jason. Just take a moment for that. And I know you both may have some background in having engaged in dialogue with each other, but see if you can do it now for a little while as a part of this process. So beyond the immediate reactions and labels that you had, envisioning each other as fuller people. Okay, now we're going to gradually make the transition here. You might take again a collective breath as we make a transition to phase two of the dialogue, and that is the background phase. And why don't we begin with uh, with Jason? And Jason, if you could share with Shlomit uh, a few critical events that shaped your perspective on Zionism, based on our definition, our working definition. In particular, how your parents, your subculture treated the issue, and were there any formative events in your life that shaped your perspective on Zionism? Okay, why don't you go ahead and begin, Jason?
Hi, hi, Shlomit, and hi, Kirk. Thank you for allowing us to be here today.
So,
And so, for me, growing up in Los Angeles as a Jewish American, uh, Zionism wasn't rumination. It wasn't something really discussed in my family. I had aversions to being a Jewish identifying individual. Like I was Jewish, I didn't know what it meant for me. I didn't see the value in the religion. I had some difficult experiences going to Hebrew school, and it kind of just pushed me away from feeling a sense of belonging within the Jewish community, even though I would say I grew up pretty um, engaged in a reform kind of Jewish background, which is, I would call it Jewish light for people that might not know. Um, yeah, culturally Jewish, celebrating holidays, maybe going to synagogue here or there, but in a very light format. Uh, Critical events that really shaped my view on Zionism, only until really before entering college. My mom talked about visiting Israel and going to see the Jewish national homeland. And I was like, okay, I was blessed and privileged enough to grow up as an international traveler more than local within the U.S. But really, I had some critical moments that shaped me, shaped and formed my identity into who and where I am today. That all kind of emanated from attending San Francisco State University, where I currently still reside in San Francisco. Um, I even, one that happened in high school, I was actually I was informed from someone my mom ran into while I was with her at a Whole Foods that oh, your son's going to, I knew I was going to San Francisco State. And he was like, oh, don't you know that's the most anti-Israel, anti-Semitic campus in the US? And you know, at that time, I was like, that's fine. I'm not really involved in the Jewish community, so it's not going to affect me. Little did I know that arriving to a place like San Francisco State, I ended up seeing kind of after coming what I would say from a very culturally diverse and inclusive background growing up in Los Angeles, where my friends were of many different ethnicities. And that I didn't focus so much on my Jewishness or Jewish background. SF State, felt like a divisive campus when it came to ethnic communities, and it felt like a more of a separation. People retreating into, maybe it's a coming into their own ethnic identities. I experienced a lot of that. I think, personally, I started diving more into what my Jewish identity meant for me in seeing how divisive, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would play out on that campus. And, there's a lot of imposter syndrome for that, right? Do I know do I know about Jewish scripture? Do I know about Jewish liturgy? Let alone to know anything about this, the state of Israel's history, right? And in its founding. So college was a formative identity building experience for me, but also a time where I only pushed further into, knowing the other. Um, but, to address the critical points of Zionism on a campus as such, and that I've seen on a lot of college campuses throughout the US and in the Bay Area, Zionism has been kind of a word ever since I went to San Francisco State that has been kind of trashed through the mud. And I had to figure out what the meaning of Zionism was for myself. Um, you know, Working off our common understanding of Zionism, right? For the Jews to have a right to their own self-determination and the establishment of a state of Israel. But on the college campuses, it's something that is seen as a form of racism.
So thank you. So it sounds like that mobilized you to have more of an empathy for a Zionist point of view. That's what I'm hearing.
To clarify, I did a lot of work understanding what it meant to be Jewish, what it meant to have a state of Israel, and also I did a lot of work to understand what others thought of this concept of Zionism. A lot of it was confusing, but I think because of my strength and diversity and knowing the other, I was able to listen to things that I didn't know if they were true or not.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And Shlomit, if you could now take a few moments to convey to Jason what was it like to grow up in terms of the issue of Zionism, and were there any critical incidents that shaped your view?
Right. Yeah, hi.
Right.
Be here. Thank you everybody for listening. So I grew up in Israel, lived there till I was in my mid-20s. I'm now in my early 40s. So I come from a family of most of my family come from Eastern Europe, some from Russia and that area, some from Poland, Germany, that area. Some of my family are native to the land born in Jerusalem, inside the walls, many, many years ago. Just a bit of a contest of who I am and what my family's roots are. My grandfather, my mom's dad, and my father, my dad, both describe themselves as Zionists. And so I grew up with that idea in my home. Growing up, Zionism was, I didn't really think much about it. or about what it means. We learn about it in school as kids. And what we learn is that, you know, Jewish people were all over the world, and they were prosecuted, and they needed a place to call home. And then the Zionistic movement started, and you know, and here we are, just to kind of sum it up. So for me, a pivotal moment around this concept of Zionism was, I would say, maybe around 10 years ago, where I started questioning the ongoing, ever-going conflict and between the Jewish people of Israel and the Palestinians. Given that I was already away from Israel, I already lived here in California, I had the privilege of a perspective of time and space to look at the situation and the effect that it has on the people of that land. And I started questioning and started looking into the other side of the border, the side that I have not been able to see or meet while I was living there growing up. And it was pretty painful to see the things that I've realized and learned were very painful for me to accept. Learning about the Nakba from that, or the, you know, what happened in 48 from that perspective, and just understanding that what I've learned and what I've the knowledge that I was given over the years was one-sided, and it was really hard for me personally to realize that. And then I was about to become a mom, and it made it all very urgent to me, to understand and to heal and to seek dialogue and to seek the human side of the situation. And so that's when I actually joined the dialogue group where we met. And that also was and still is a very important part of my life. It was the first time I sat in the same room with a Palestinian from across the border, which was kind of shocking for me to realize that I had to go all the way to here to do that instead of driving a couple of hours.
Unfortunately, we need to wind up soon.
Yeah, so that's it. Those are the, yeah.
Does that cover it for you pretty well? I mean, the essential points. Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you both. So let's take a moment here to make the transition to the third phase, which is where you describe taking your stance. You describe your stance, your perspective, in this case on Zionism. Okay, and Jason, I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to do that, and then I'll ask Shalomit if she would feed back the essence of what she heard you say.
Taking a stance. What comes up, you know, in my heart and in my body is one, as just who I am as an individual, is it's not so much taking a stance for me that's hard. That's really difficult. And now's the time in my life and our lives that I feel that people are being forced to take a stance, right? And creates a lot of sidisms and right versus wrong, you know. And I don't believe in that path forward personally. I'll state that. Now, I think I think it's important to create a space where we can share our opinions on the matter. And you know, in regards to Zionism, I really believe in my experience, right? I think there's the like post-Zionism kind of mindset of I believe history played out in the way it did, where with Jews experiencing anti-Semitism, what was, you know, European nationalism of the time, and Jews are our people. And in our liturgy and text, there's always been, you know, ruminations of you know, a return to Zion and the promised land once they were, you know, the last exile, right? And maybe in 70 CE, if that's what if that is common knowledge and understanding. And yeah, and you know, Jews facing persecution in Arab countries as well, all led to a more secular nationalist movement, you know, along our history. And with the, you know, with the establishment and creation of a state of Israel, I believe that is true. I believe it was just for the time in which it took place. None of us were alive then. Actually, maybe some of us in the room, I don't want to exclude anyone. My landlord was actually 84, and people in our dialogue group, right? Um and I think the thing I wrestle with today is you know, how that history played out and where we can move forward. So I do not, I will stand firmly and say I am a Zionist. I believe that Jews have a right to their own self-determination. They have a right to have a country for themselves in their indigenous homelands. And I don't believe Zionism is a form of racism unless you are actually you know, unless one actually comes out and says they're anti-Arab or, you know, wish to remove Palestinians from the land. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to rectifying pain and trauma that, you know, both peoples have experienced in that's not an I statement, right? But personally, uh on a little background professionally, I work as a Jewish community professional, so I think I am here speaking somewhat from the what we call the mainstream organized Jewish institutions. That's where I've been employed and doing community building work for Jewish identity building. Mostly been working with young adults on college campuses for the last 10 years. And there's a lot of pain within the Jewish community that I've experienced in like what Shlomit said, not knowing the other side, feeling lied to by their Jewish institutions and how they learn about Israel. And but I also think there's a lot of bully tactics and um, kind of phrases that don't see the human side in anyone who might have any kind of relationship to Zionism or the individual in their relationship to the state of Israel or Palestine.
Thank you, Jason. Shlomit, can you reflect back to Jason the essence of what you heard, just very briefly?
Yeah. I heard that Jason feels he supports the essence of the Zionistic idea of the right for Jewish people to have a homeland in their ancestral land, on their ancestral land, given the prosecution that happened for the Jewish people around the world, and in lots of the Arab countries around as well. And yeah, and then since Jason works with the where he works, he feels like he's in a way representing the mainstream, quote unquote, and trying to support Jewish youth in building their identity and feeling community. I'm pretty sure that's right.
Thank you. Jason, any gaps that you'd like to correct in Shlomit's reflection? Just very briefly.
Yeah, I think she hit the nail head on. Yeah, like just personally, I wouldn't say I want to say I represent the mainstream Jewish community, but supporting Jewish individuals that might not know what their Jewish history and identity means for them, and helping them find that sense of belonging that I think each individual longs for, including myself. And that Zionism in the college campus environment in which I work and have experienced what many sides of what Zionism is and is not. There's a lot of like dissonance and hatred I feel towards Jewish individuals. A lot of assumptions made. I maybe I'm just adding on to my piece earlier, but it's hard to walk around feeling like you're assumed to be a Zionist just because you're Jewish or you identify the student group on a campus. And I will staunchly say that that's what I have experienced and what my peers and colleagues have experienced on college campuses.
Hey, thank you. Shlomit, could you now describe your stance on Zionism? Briefly, if you would.
Yeah,
About 4 minutes.
sure. I okay, so as we know, it's a triggering concept. But where my critical view comes into play is like I support the idea of for the Jewish people to have a homeland, as I support the idea of any people to have a homeland. Like I don't think there's any difference between the Jewish people or any other people. Everybody deserves to have a place to live, in dignity and with their family and all that. We all know the reasons, we all know the history. Where my critical point of view come to play is the price that was paid by the people who were living on that land at the time. And the absolute diminishing of their culture and of the Palestinian culture and identity, and kind of disrespecting it in a way. And till this day, their identity and their history and their culture is not celebrated or taught or respected in the same way that the Jewish one is in Israel. And so that is where my problem is with Zionism. The right to have a homeland is, I support that for, as I said, for all humans on this earth.
Thank you. Jason, will you now reflect the essence of what you heard Shlomi say and convey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard from you, Shlomit, that in essence you support that every individual should have every individual, every family should have a right to their own kind of self-determination, living in safety, dignity, and health. And that, Zionism, you know, these, sorry, apologies. Having a homeland for the Jewish people is you believe this, but the price that was paid is very heavy to bear, and that in the current state of Israel, maybe the other minorities or the Palestinians and Christians as well might not have their culture, equally kind of celebrated and honored within the state of Israel.
Thank you. And Shalmit, do you have any correction to make, or fill in any of the gaps that Jason missed in his reflection?
Sounds about right.
All right. Okay. All right. Take a breath again as we transition to the fourth phase. And this is the stereotypes exercise. So Jason, I'm going to ask you to be the first speaker and to, first of all, identify any of the stereotypes that have been imposed upon you from your perception by people negative toward you. So if you can share those with Shlomit. Stereotypes by people negative toward you. How have they labeled you, reduced you, however you want to put that? I have a couple of minutes.
In my experience, as an add-on to our previous phase, what I mean to feel like you're perceived as a Zionist just for being Jewish or identifying with a Jewish religious institution or a Jewish identity institution that can be seen as mainstream, especially on a college campus like Hillel. People walk around, if they see you, maybe it's a campus tabling event, and if they see you at Hillel, then they think you're Zionist, and then they assume your position, and if you are a Zionist, you are racist, and support the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, and that is devoid of human, of critical thinking, flat out. I think I will also add here, in our first kind of meditation as we began, I work with many Israelis, and I think there's some stereotyping that I've directly experienced from Israelis, but I acknowledge that it's hard for them, and Shulamit mentioned this, to have the privilege and space to kind of see a bigger picture. And it's hard, even in my work and how fond I am of my relationships with Israelis, that it's hard to have this broader discussion at times, and that American Jews are also stereotyped for, even having the privilege to discuss such matters as we are here today, and that they somehow can't afford that. And in my experience with various relationships, right, to discuss a definition of Zionism or to even have the heart and space to move forward.
Thank you. Can you now describe any of the false and misleading aspects of those stereotypes to fill out the picture of who you are beyond the stereotypes, just briefly?
Yeah, I think it's hard for, emerging young adults, and in my experience to feel that lack of common decency, and an understanding of the other, when our supposed stances are prejudged by another, and dialogue work and how I've held relationships with folks from other ethnic, friends from other ethnic backgrounds, where politics and religion never really played a role is I think it's misleading. And I also believe today that, we're seeing the extremes on social media and our news and how we consume news, and it's only, sadly, technology, I feel, is only keeping us removed from the human and the other, and the kind of the everyday personal interactions that are usually nice and not, that don't make us have anxiety about or fear of the other.
Thank you. And now this is a little bit tougher for many people, but can you identify any nuggets of truth to the stereotypes that have been imposed upon you?
There's truth. I'm one that, firmly believes that everyone has their own truth. And even in my life experience, I've been able to hear things that might make me feel angry or frustrated, or, um, you know, hear Zionism trashed like through the mud and vilified, right? To be even consider myself a Zionist. And I think there's nuggets of truth to the Palestinian, there is truth to the Palestinian experience, and how Zionism, the result and outcome of Zionism has impacted many, many families for now generations. I think living in San Francisco is also a privilege. I mean, for many reasons, but also because there are many there's a large Palestinian community here, and sometimes first generation as well. And there's nuggets of truth of expulsion and ethnic cleansing and an inability to return home to their lands. And although I can't support vilification of Jews, of maybe someone you perceive as Zionist, but you don't know, and you don't know what that means for them. I wouldn't want to walk around this world assuming Palestinians are all terrorists ever. And it's sad that is a reality on both sides.
Thank you. Shlomit, can you now share with Jason how you perceive being stereotyped by people negative toward you, for your perspective,
Yeah.
briefly?
Sure. Yes, I will just say that to me, it comes from my community back in Israel, some friends and people who, when they hear what I think or the way I see or the things that I say, they call me a traitor. I'm not really sure how to translate those words, but like basically saying that I have left, that I don't understand, that I ran away, that I'm weak, and in general, yeah, just a traitor. And I unfortunately lost friendships around that. It's very painful, but the name calling is rough, and it can go really low and very personal. And so yeah, I would say that. Does that answer the question?
Can you now share the false and misleading aspects, or very key false and misleading aspects of that stereotype toward you?
I love Israel. That's my home. That's where I grew up. It's where my family is, my dad, my brother, I have friends. I hold Israel is in my heart, is me. I am an Israeli, and that's the food I cook to my children at home, and that's the language I speak with them. And I I don't see myself as a traitor by wanting to respect everyone and saying that life is important and dignity is important on both sides. So
Thank you. And the last part, any nuggets of truth to the stereotypes that have been imposed on you, or the stereotype you mentioned?
I did leave. I'm not there. And there's a reason. I chose to raise my children here, and I chose to not give them an Israeli citizenship for a reason, for a few reasons. And when they're adults, they could choose different. They can make their own choice, and I will respect that. But but it's not from a place of hate to Israel. It's for a place of disagreement with the way the government work and the army rules, and I just don't want my children to be forced to go to the army if they don't want to. But that's aside. But I would just say that yes, I left, and yes, I am criticizing of some aspects of the Israeli society and especially the government.
All right, let's go gradually now to phase 5, which is asking a question of each other. And again, I'd ask you to keep it very brief. But let's begin with Jason. Jason, do you have a question for Shlomit that comes from a place of genuine curiosity as to her particular stance?
Yeah, it's just because one participates in dialogue doesn't mean we always have the opportunity to takes time to dive into the personal story. I'm really curious how you navigate, Shlomit, your relationship to Israelis. There's a lot of pain in feeling kind of the name calling and traitorship that I think I also acknowledged is difficult to speak with Israelis, but I don't see that as it was my question of curiosity is how you and we can also navigate our relationships with Israelis to hopefully make it some, the society that we would like to envision.
Do I answer now?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I'm not sure I really understand it. How can you ask it again? It's a little confusing.
I think there's a lot of pain and suffering that Israelis go through, and I think I understand you as someone who it's hard to lose friends and experience name calling, but I also think, I mean, maybe it's me taking a Zionist vision standpoint, but like, how do we still work with today's Israelis, your friends, the one, anyone you still have, or the Israeli community here, and create more, sensitivities, right? And how can you create the Israel that you would want to live in, right? One day, if you ever wanted to move back home.
Well, I think it's really important to create a separation between the Israeli people and the Israeli government, and to always remember that the government is not always a representative of the people. As I mean, I think to me it's obvious, but it seems like it's not obvious to everyone else. So just, to like come with a curiosity and open-minded of each individual as they are, and with a hope that their heart is open. But just with the curiosity and without the generalizing of Israelis as a whole, because within the Israeli society, there's many different ideas and thoughts, as we all know, as the same as here. And within the American society, it's like, there's so many. So just remember that we all are individuals, and we all have our ideas and thoughts, and just be open-minded to hear those.
Thank you. So Shlamit, do you have a question coming from genuine wonder about Jason's perspective?
Yeah, with the context of this conversation about Zionism, I guess I'm curious to know if the idea, or if the if the idea of Zionism have transformed or have changed with the recent events in Israel, with the recent war, like if your relationship with Zionism, but also like, would you describe it different? Like, would you change the dictionary description of Zionism as it was written, who knows when? Today, would you write it differently? Knowing,
Jason?
Yeah. Need a moment to ponder that. My heart is torn today. It's torn for what I see the Israeli government doing. It's torn actually for the people of Israel, not the government, the people that are finding it difficult to hold space for the people dying in Gaza. It's torn for some of the mainstream Jewish community's reaction, right? And inability and why we're speaking for, like, I feel torn that I think I feel that my mainstream Jewish people or the Jewish people are only gonna continue to tear themselves apart over how we communicate about Zionism and what a Zionist project looks like, or continuing to move forward as a state of Israel hopefully after this war. I wouldn't rewrite the definition. I think, it's wordy. People need to go back to civil discourse. I am reminded every time we are in dialogue how much, like, we're living in a over communicated world and not on a humanistic planet, and it's a reminder just to almost be off my phone and be present with the people I'm with on a day-to-day basis, which involve many Israelis and many people from all walks of life. I think you can only rewrite the definition to acknowledge, you can change the past, but but I think the concept of Zionism always makes me feel like we're stuck in the past and not moving forward to the present. And that is my honest belief about Zionism and how to move forward with all, together. Israelis and Israelis, right? A lot of rifts, and Israelis and Palestinians meeting each other and being kind to each other.
Thank you both. And if we had more time, you could do follow-ups, but unfortunately we don't. So let's go to the final phase, which is the discovery results. And I ask you both, what did you learn? What did you learn about your own perspective? What did you learn about each other's perspective? Any potential for common ground or that you resonated with in each other's perspectives, or anything that was said, conveyed through this time?
Sorry, let me shift location real quick.
Okay, can you hear? Okay. So maybe
Should I
begin-
answer that?
Yeah, why don't we begin with you, Shlomit?
Okay. Just want to apologize. I live in the forest and there's some tree work. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's
I
a
can.
lot of, okay, good. Uh, um, so I mean, I think Jason and I think we agree on a lot of things. And so okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you just focus me here just in one sentence, the
Oh,
question?
did you learn anything new?
Did I learn anything? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if I learned anything new just because we've known each other for almost a decade. So we've walked this path for some time and heard each other's opinions and ideas. I I did hear Jason's being torn with the idea of Zionism, which I guess that was kind of new to me. Just the ambivalent feelings around it. So
Any actionable common ground, like something you could see yourself joining Jason with, just quickly?
yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the idea of supporting the the Jewish youth and the Jewish people and reclaiming or understanding their Jewishness and their roots and their relationship with Israel. I think that's important, and also maybe like explain what Zionism means, as I see that when you drop that word in a room, it catches fire. And so just like make that word not as flammable by using dialogue, by listening and sharing ideas and communicating around it and educating oneself.
Thank you. Jason, did you learn anything different? Anything that you want to share with Shlomit? Potential for actionable common ground?
Yeah, I think some common ground is how we interact with the Israeli community at times, not to be selfish. There's not enough Shlomits yet. You know, there will never be enough Shlomits, but there's not enough Israelis that that you know are ready to sit and listen to things that might be uncomfortable. And I need support because I do that work on a day-to-day basis. I'm not ashamed of in, understanding the other, but also advocating for Israel to have Israel's right to existence, hostages needing to be returned, violence, condemning violence as violence. But also like working, I would, I heard from Shlomit that you have, you have so much history and ties to the land that I actually, we've been walking this path for 10 years, but I think there's even more to share what it means to have that even not like that knowledge of the history of, your family roots and history being tied to Jerusalem, right? So how do, and envisioning a new society and creating a new world, how do we do that together? I think that can always be brought more to the fore in how we do dialogue.
Well, thank you both so much for giving of your time and your humanity to this conversation. And as an illustration for people to hopefully carry on in their own way in the world. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could elaborate, that you two could elaborate, and obviously this conversation is ongoing. But deep appreciation for what you have both given today. And I know that you both need to head off. And what I want to say to the audience is that we will have some time at the end of this webinar for Q&A, for discussion, so we can reflect on what you all brought up or what came up for the audience when you go out into breakout groups momentarily and practice this approach. And I think probably people need a 5-minute break. Given the time that we have, I'm limiting that to 5 minutes. Of course, you two are welcome, Shlomit and Jason, to return at the Q&A period, but I know that that may be a problem given your other commitments. So much appreciation, and perhaps our paths will cross again.
It
Thank you so
will.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Libby, too, for this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you, Levi, for all that you do all the time.
I second that.
I mean,
Okay.
just in case I can't come back, is it worth if anyone wants to ask us a question?
Well,
I
I'm
don't
concerned about the
I have
time.
10 minutes if
Yeah.
you want that.
Well, okay. Let's we can open it up to the floor. Let's go with the charge of the moment. And we'll take 5 to 10 at most. Anybody, John, are you keeping track of anybody raising their hand for observation, question?
I am indeed. Costas, I can see you've got your hand raised. Let's see if we can open your mic and bring your video into the main screen. Yeah.
I don't have a question as such. What I do want is to give you both thanks from the bottom of my heart for being who you are and bringing what you brought to the forum. It's not often that I feel like I want to applaud, but today I feel like I want to give you both a humongous round of applause. So thank you so much. Thank you. And that comes from a Greek person, yeah?
Thank you, Costas. I'm sure a lot of us share in your feeling. I do. Anyone else briefly?
Well, if anybody wants to raise your Zoom hand or wave at your video or let us know in the chat that you'd like to be unmuted. We can help you with that. While we're waiting, there is a question there about the organization that you've both been taking this path in with. Or, yeah.
Yeah, we do dialogue with the Jewish Palestinian Living Room Dialogue Group out of San Francisco and San Mateo.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
Founded by Len and Libby Trautman. And Libby is on this call with us.
Yes, she is.
Libby, I'm sending you the unmute request just in case there's anything you want to say, but
If there's
you don't
anything you
have
want to say, Libby.
I would just share that, you know, I'm so proud to know Jason and Shlomit that they were willing to play this role, because it's not easy, you know, you feel like you're on the hot seat sometimes, and I think this is a beautiful demonstration, Kirk, of what you are offering to people, a way to humanize society, because we are living in a very, very challenging world, not just the United States of America, but the whole living planet is facing a lot of challenges about where we're going to end up in the next 5 years and 10 years and so forth. So I think being able to talk to each other, support each other, affirm each other. And Kirk, I have to say, the whole thing that you opened with about fear, that whole thing about the fear of the unknown, that really registered with me right away, because I think that's what we experience in these relationships, is the fear of being rejected, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being dismissed, not having our community. And so it just really reinforced the importance that I feel that the dialogue activity, the role that it plays today in America, and the Better Angels and all these different groups that are working to make this happen, just it couldn't come at a more important time.
Thank you so much, Libby, and for all that you do. I'll just say quickly also that I think these dialogues are ways of forming new internalizations about the two, through the relationship that is built between people who, at least on the surface, are on very different sides. You two are on different sides in some ways. There are very few forums like face-to-face or person-to-person, one-on-one, that provide a chance for that kind of humanization. Otherwise, we often, come from a more group perspective or a particular category. But when you're actually with the living, breathing human being, and we try to do that to the degree we can, even though it's through an electronic medium, I would see so much more. So I'll stop there.
Can I say just one more
Yes,
thing?
yes.
I'm gonna second Libby here. Your introduction about fear was for me really important to listen to, and I want to say that joining the Living Room Dialogue, this group that we're in, brought me to face that fear. Growing up as a Jewish person in Israel, there is this institutionalized fear that we nurse, as children, of the other side. And because the other side is behind a wall and we never see them, it is the unknown. And that unknown of the other side is growing to levels of like a horror movie, like you were talking about. And so walking into a living room with that other side sitting there on the couch I was nervous. I was a little scared, and there was a lot of feelings and emotions that came out. And over the years, I learned to, that other side are now my friends, and we hug and we share, and I know their children, they know mine, and there's no more fear there. And that is my prayer for the people to not have to go all the way to the other side of the world to find that. We can open our doors and just go whatever 3 miles away, and the other side is there. And once we remember our own humanity and open our hearts, we can see the other sides too.
I just want to say we need a lot more of those living rooms.
I agree.
I would, yeah, I hope it's not like a shameless plug, but I would say the activity portion of this is almost more important than hearing Shlomit and I do what we did. It's how I learned about dialogue when I didn't share my age like Shlomit did, but I was 19. And now I'm 29, so the activity piece of this is really where something in your heart can, maybe a new aorta of your heart can unlock, and that is the experience I've had through dialogue.
Yes, well said. And this is just giving people a taste of what I feel you go much more in depth into when you're actually in the same quarters together.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, different people's homes are also a very important part of the humanizing. So with that,
one more question in the chat. Have we got
okay,
or Kirk, is that okay? Or
would have to be quick. Yeah.
a quick question. Yes, absolutely. So in what kind of situations, scenarios can we adopt such a one-on-one approach?
Well, I would say, first of all, consider joining a group like Braver Angels or Living Room Dialogues. There are other groups around nonviolent communication. Arnie Mandel's world work, deep democracy work. There's also a group called Starts With Us. Join in these experiential democracy dialogue forums. Carry on what you can of this, let's say, this supportive, structured dialogue format with friends or family, people in the community. Encourage leaders, especially. I think we need to get to our social leaders to engage with each other, people who are on different sides of issues, engage with each other in these supportive, structured ways where people are paying attention to ground rules. That is absolutely critical. Otherwise, the conversations, again, spiral out of control very quickly, and into that primal terror that we are so often coming from, and even at an unwitting level. So those are some suggestions. I would say maybe read books on these type of groups. My book, The Depolarizing of America, also lays out a lot of context for this, carrying on this kind of conversation. Okay, so shall we take 5 minutes then, John?
Okay, yeah, just a very quick break, I guess you think, so that we
very
can
quick.
do the next bit.
I'm concerned about giving people in the audience some time, to do breakout groups and to try out at least most of the format. We may
Sounds
not
like a
have
plan.
time for all.
Should
And
we
then
come
some
back?
time for
sorry.
discussion.
Yeah. So maybe we'll come back in 5 minutes, just enough time to get the kettle on. And yeah. And thank you, Shlomit and Jason. Just such a wonderful conversation, deeply, deeply touching. Thank you both. Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. So now we're going to invite you into breakout rooms. so that you can try out the dialogue format that Shlomit and Jason just engaged in. And you're going to be paired up randomly, as I understand it. So I know that can be a bit of a challenge. You don't know that other who you're dealing with. But what I'm going to ask you to do for this initial part, which is the setup part, is to take 2 minutes to decide with your partner what topic you're going to take on. And it certainly doesn't have to be the issue of Zionism. There are obviously numerous relevant issues right now: political, cultural polarization, climate change, current leadership in various countries, including our own. So you all decide on a topic that you can take contrasting stands on. Like with Shlomit and Jason, it doesn't have to be sharply contrasting, but maybe you differ on certain points, enough so that that there's an attempt at bridge building, or there's an attempt at understanding another side. That's what's important here. One partner may even want to role play another side. We've often found that very helpful, to get into, empathize with the role of someone that they don't necessarily agree with. And it may be a family member or whatever. But it would be important, if you do that, to have a narrative behind it, to have a background and know something about, what was formative in shaping your perspective. So, it could be emulating a family member or a friend or someone and something about their background. So let's begin with that 2-minute portion, where you'll now be placed in Zoom rooms. 2 people will be placed in Zoom rooms. And please decide now what topic you will take on together in terms of being on contrasting sides.
And we're going to take 2 minutes for that, I guess, Kirk, for that part of the process. And just, I think, Wesley, we would say sometimes with dyads, it's possible that one colleague's tech isn't working. So if you don't have a partner, come back. And if we get a couple of people like that, we can make some new groups. So yeah, so please don't wait on your own for the whole 2 minutes. Come back if you're a bit stuck, and Wesley will look after you.
It's important to have an even number. If there's an odd number, then hopefully one of the staff or someone can join in with that person, or that person can observe, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's see how it.
Let's see how we get on. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Wesley. Let's us back together again in the main room. Right. And Kirk, I think we've got you on mute. Let's see if we can get your microphone open. Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry for the the pace here, but just concerned that you have some time to work with this in a very living way. So let's now move momentarily to phase 1. And again, you all are aware of the ground rules: openness, respect, curiosity. And this is not a debate. It's to learn about and understand each other, not to presume or impose views on each other. Okay, so let's begin with phase 1, which is just we'll give you about a minute and 30 seconds, a minute and 30 seconds for the first part of phase 1, which is to envision, just envision what it might be like to engage with that person who identifies with the other side. What feelings, sensations, images come up for you in particular, and watch them like things flowing down a river. Don't get fixated on any of them. Just notice, just observe what's operating on you as you conceive of engaging with that person. Okay, let's begin. And we can, I guess, we don't need to bring them back for the second part. Let me just say for the second part, after a minute and 30 seconds, then we'll ask you to see if you can conceive of the partner as a human being and not just your immediate reactions. A person with their own story, their own struggles and facets. So I don't know, Wesley, maybe you can give them a reminder at minute 30 seconds to then switch to seeing the other as a person. Okay.
And we can share the slide into the breakout rooms if that would be helpful. What do you
Okay,
think, Kirk?
that's good too.
Yeah.
So, but let's give this 3 minutes. Minute 30 first part, minute 30 second part.
Okay.
Welcome back. So let's go on to phase 2 now, which is giving your background. So one of you choose to begin first and talk about just key points of what it was like to grow up in light of the issue that you're discussing. How did your parents treat it, the subculture you were in treat it, and any formative events, critical incidents that shaped your perspective on the topic. Okay, let's begin with that, and we can take let's say 3 minutes each for that. Hey, welcome back. So let's go on to phase 3 now, where I invite you to take turns describing your stance on the topic you've chosen. And given time restraints, I'd like to have the speaking partner take 3 minutes. I'm sorry, 2 minutes. I know that's not very long. Let's say 2 minutes to describe your stance as concisely as possible. Have the listening partner reflect back what they heard, and then correct any gaps in what they heard. The speaking partner corrects any gaps in what they heard. And then we switch partners. So it's going to be a total of 6 minutes for this as well. 3 minutes each partner. Again, at least you'll have a taste of it. You know that there can be longer dimensions of it. I want some time for us to be able to gather and talk about this as a group. Okay, so let's begin this. And Wesley, if you could give them a signal at 3 minutes to switch partners, I'd appreciate it. All right, welcome everyone. So let's go on to the 4th phase, which is the stereotypes exercise. And now I invite you to take turns. The speaking partner will begin first identifying stereotypes by people negative toward them. How have people negative toward them labeled them, reduced them with stereotypes, conveying that to your partner. Then the second part for the speaking partner, that's 1 minute. It's going to be 1 minute each part. Second part for the speaking partner is identifying the false and misleading aspects of the way they've been reduced and stereotyped. And the third part, they'll have a minute to identify any nuggets of truth to the stereotype, thus sharing more vulnerability with their partner and less of a holier than thou position, which often lends itself to more openness in the dialogue. Okay, so let's begin, Wesley. So this will be a total of 6 minutes, 3 minutes each partner to do the 3 parts. And you can give them a signal at 3 minutes to switch partners. And then we'll come back at 6 minutes. And I think we'll skip the question phase and we'll go right to discovery results. So we have time for Q&A. I think we're all back at this point.
Here we are. We're back again together. Yes.
Good. So let's take now 3 minutes each, a total of 6 minutes, to talk about what you learned. What you learned about your own perspective through the process as far as we got, and what you learned about the other's perspective, what you learned about your relationship with the other. And was there any potential for common ground, bridge building in some way, or even actionable steps that you could see yourself taking with that person or on your own? Okay, so let's go for it. 3 minutes each partner to talk about what you learned. And Wesley, if you could give them a reminder to switch partners at 3 minutes, that would be great. Total of 6 minutes, and then we'll come back, a large group for Q&A. Welcome back all. So now we have a chance to catch our breath and take some time, some concerted time to share our observations, questions. I can stay a little bit after the hour, and I think John as well, if need be. But let's begin with anyone wanting to share thoughts, questions. Yes, it looks like Delia raised her hand, or I don't know. John, are you tracking the?
I am. Yeah, let's see if we can open up your microphone, Julia. There we go.
Okay, so thank you very much. We had a very nice session, and I'd like to say that I found it very effective because I was speaking to someone who I had already developed prejudices against because of certain things. I'm sure she knows what I'm talking about, the way she presented herself with her name here. And they were completely debunked, which was really, really nice. So a bit of fate there that we got stuck in a room together. But can I be heard?
Yes, I wasn't quite sure about the last statement. Did you say you achieved common ground, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, my prejudices were totally. I mean, they were totally debunked. They disappeared.
Interesting.
Yes. So I found her a very very engaging, very humane, very empathic, and so on. And what I'd like to say is what I think it's very important to stick to the rules. Yeah, because it's so easy. It's so easy to get derailed. Yeah. And what I found really helpful was the visualization in the beginning, not so much of having the conversation, but of seeing this other person as a person with their own history, their own struggles, their own pains, their own whatever. That was really helpful to get me into the exercise.
So I really appreciate you sharing that, Delia. Yeah, that's helpful to note. And I know others have reflected that experience as well. And that's where we're trying to bring some of the therapeutic principles to bear as well, which is so important in reaching our inner lives. You know, that's so much of what this is about, is working with our inner lives, not just the externals. So thank you. Okay, anyone else like to share your observation, questions, concerns? Looks like Alice has raised their hand.
Yeah. Alice, we're just trying to open your mic there.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
can.
Yeah, it's Eilish. Thank you. It was really interesting. What I found difficult was the stereotype part. So trying to hold on to, is it a stereotype about what I'm bringing? Is it a stereotype in general? I struggled with that part of it.
Well, it's supposed to be a stereotype about the perspective that you hold.
Okay.
So it's people negative toward you and that view, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I
Thank
can
you.
understand.
People
I mean,
negative towards me and my view. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's
I
clear.
mean, basically, you're sharing with your partner more vulnerability about how you walk through the world, how you've been experienced by people critical of you, and that may well be your partner as well in many of these, dialogue contexts. So you're giving your partner more of a sense of how you felt reduced and maybe hurt by being boxed in like that, which is very important information to a person who holds another view. Anyway, so appreciate your question. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, or your that was complete?
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Kirk.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, any other comments, questions? I
Amanda?
also, oh, I'm sorry.
Amanda, I think yeah.
Yeah, hi, Kirk.
Oh, good.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, well, firstly, I wanted to say when we did the process, it was interesting because we didn't actually disagree. We had problems in getting into a breakout room quickly in the beginning and stuff, so we were a bit behind. But actually, we went through the process, and even though we didn't agree, there was a lot of value in doing it, in taking a stance, and there was a huge learning. So for me, one of the things I learned was that I underestimate the threat that another person may feel. So I will really take that actually in terms of the issue that we talked about, and how I can find a path through that. So I found that really valuable. The question I had was, I can imagine a situation where people get triggered and could come out of the structure and start becoming a bit more blaming, if that makes sense. And have you had that, and how would you handle that? Do you just bring them back to the structure? If there is a sort of, triggering people getting really emotional and maybe starting the blaming language, how would you handle that? I just wanted to hear you speak something about that, Kirk, please.
Well, first of all, it doesn't happen too often.
Okay.
At least the forums that I've been in, people, especially because I think I've primed them or prepared them with the importance of adhering to the ground rules.
Mm-hmm.
People are generally respectful of that. But it does happen on occasion. And especially if you're a moderator, you need to be prepared to interject. And that's what I do. I interject at that time. I try to do it empathically, supportively. But I may say something like, Amanda, this is not about your partner. Can you go back to your experience of this problem, or what are you feeling? Can you convey that to your partner? It's really about staying with you.
Okay.
And sharing with your partner your experience rather than saying anything about them.
Okay, thank you.
Something like that. Something like that. But a redirection is needed.
Yeah.
If somebody starts blaming. And of course, depending on how intensely it gets, redirection may need to be more assertive.
Yeah.
But you don't want to, hopefully you're not devaluing the partners. I have been in one situation where two folks were just exchanging talking points to each other. They were very high up in their sort of positions in academia, I'll say. And and also representing governmental positions. And it was very difficult for them to see this not as a debate
Mm,
and not having talking points with each other,
mm,
but as honestly sharing their perspectives. And so I had to ride them continually,
mm,
come back to what are you feeling? You
mm,
know, not what your party says or this group says. Can you please refrain from talking about your partner and go back to, you know, what is your experience? Can you share your feeling or your thought about this?
mm,
Can you make an I statement? Something
mm.
like that.
Yeah, okay. And I can see that gets into the right or wrong, more of a sort of academic debate
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
actually how they feel about it. Thank you, Kirk. That's really
yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Or or you may have to say that this is not a debate. This
Mm,
is really about learning about and understanding the other and genuine curiosity, which is not easy to do, as you all see. I appreciate what you said about threat, that was
mm,
important for you
mm,
to perceive how threatening you were or your view was. Is
yeah,
that what you're saying? Uh-huh.
yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was to do with refugees and,
Mhm.
an area that's the area I work in, and it's to do with how threatening that is for, a member of my family. So, but actually, if I can really understand how threatening it is, it helps me
Yes.
be much more empathic towards that view.
Good, good. Yeah, that's so much of what this is about, is clearing a space,
Yeah.
Providing that more supportive space without interference so that people can respond to each other rather than just react. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else like to make an observation?
Stephanie, can we
Yes,
come to you
thank
next?
you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate this a lot. And I actually was thinking about also mediation and working with conflicts, and I do see tremendous potential for this. But then I also wondered if people need a certain readiness for this, because I mean, of course, in this room we are a very special group of human beings. But then also, I mean, if you have these living room dialogues and all these great formats, people make a step to come to those places. And I wonder if you have experience with people who don't want to be in the same room and how that goes.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie, and hello to you.
Hello, yeah.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, for sure. And this is a really critical question in terms of this approach and approaches that are similar to it. Not everybody is ready or desirous of these kinds of dialogues. And I do my best to respect that. And frankly, these kinds of dialogues are not likely to reach the most extreme folks. But if they can reach what I would call the critical masses of people, and I do think there are more people than we hear about in the media often or in politics who would like to find out more about the other, or certainly would like to have a more civil kind of discourse, civil engagement in society. If we can be reaching those folks, that is a major accomplishment. And yes, it's self-selecting to a great extent. So when we put on these forums, it's people who generally are ready for them, interested in them. For folks who are just not able to work with these formats, I think it's important to say that this is not the only path. There are other paths, and they should consider other paths. Hopefully, peaceable paths like nonviolent protests, marches, maybe some kind of activism in their community, writing letters to Congress people, or or trying to advocate for a cause at the voting booth, so that people change their minds about a particular issue in their society. Yeah, it's not for everybody. However, I do think it would be helpful. It provides helpful tools to more people than maybe are aware of it. It's also something I hope people can carry on their own, at least the ones who, again, feel capable of doing that and interested in doing that. You can do it on your own, but with the caution that if it becomes too much, don't push it. If your partner can't handle it or whatever, don't push it. Could be helpful to have another layperson who's can keep it together and composed, to be a moderator, to keep both parties, on track in terms of the ground rules. So, yeah, it has its particular pathway, and hopefully that can be extended and expanded. Is that helpful, Stephanie, or is there more thoughts?
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I do even think that even if people don't want to enter that room, it would be worth to give it a chance, because the methodology you are using is really going into human beings, right? And it's really seeking their humanity. And I think that's so powerful. Yeah. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And when people do actually sit with one another again, so much often shifts. It's just a whole different atmosphere, as you know, one to one, in terms of seeing the more of their humanity. Okay, looks like we have Libby, is that right? Libby, or?
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. Yes, I just wanted to say from my experience engaging in the dialogue for many years that compassionate listening, we equate with one of the great acts of love, not to sound hokey, but if you ask people when they have felt the most affirmed, loved, accepted, is when they've been deeply listened to. And so I think in any situation, like in our dialogue group, we always start each meeting with reconfirming our agreements, much the way you started out, Kirk, by agreeing on how we're going to listen, how we're going to pay attention, how we're going to take in everybody who speaks, regardless of their emotional state. And if they're crying or angry, we give space, but there is a facilitation to it because we know that everybody wants to be heard and accepted. So if we have these agreements, usually it works out beautifully because people know what to expect. And I would say the ones who come to the dialogue activities want to be there. They're there by choice because they want to feel safe. They want to be exposed to the other. And like I said in a smaller group, that an enemy is one whose story you have not heard, has been kind of a backbone of our compassionate listening work, because people have stories to share, and to feel heard is a very powerful spiritual experience.
Well said, Libby. Yeah, much appreciate that, and also you noting the spiritual aspect. Maybe that's something that gets lost around these kinds of forums, but it really is so integral. Because in a way, I think we're practicing an emerging spirituality, through connecting with each other in a larger context. realizing we're participating in something much greater than ourselves or our narrow identifications. So thank you for that. Okay, anyone else have a brief comment or question?
Costas?
Thank you, John. Hi, Kirk. Thank you so much for this very informative workshop and the methodology. Where I find it may we may hit a bit of a brick wall when it comes to this is in circumstances like hidden agendas, dogma, emotional intelligence of the partner that we are discussing these aspects with, how informed they are, what the knowledge on the subject is, and what kind of peer pressure do they have if, let's say, they admit, or if they engage in that conversation, let alone admit, like a point of view, what will their repercussions be, from the peer group or the party or whatever. And of course, the last one is the fear of losing face, isn't it? Like, oh, you come across as more knowledgeable than I am, like, or whatever. And then, of course, after all that comes the resentment. And, there are so many pitfalls to navigate. And it would take someone of your ilk to navigate those choppy waters, because sometimes I feel like I want to abort the mission.
I'm with you, Costas, and that's one of the reasons we're doing these dialogues, these webinars, is to especially reach folks in our mental health field, or in the healing field generally, or the educational field, the pastoral field, so that we can support mediators to go out throughout the country, culture to the degree possible, to promote these kinds of models in varying communities, among people that they know or that they're working with.
That would indeed be a service to humanity, Kirk.
It would be a service to humanity. What I wanted to say was, there's really a long game here, and there's a shorter term game, so to speak. The long game, in my view, and this was my platform for running as for president of APA, was that we need a national core of depth healers, national core of mental health providers to spread throughout the land and provide emotionally restorative relationships.
Wow.
That are affordable and accessible, especially to underserved communities, so that people at least have a place to go if they are having issues about how they're caught up in dogma or extremism or what have you.
Yeah.
And develop skills that hopefully would be developed earlier on, but develop skills to work with this very primal anxiety. So that's one thing, and that's a longer term aim. In the shorter term, these are ways that some people can engage, and especially if we can reach leaders to be models to many more people, that would help a lot.
Well, yeah.
I understand that's a very tall order, because they've got constituents, a lot of pressures, not to be vulnerable and be more open in their perspective. On the other hand, some of us are pushing for a deeper democracy, an emerging paradigm that sometimes comes out of catastrophe, frankly. Sadly. Are we at that inflection point now? I don't know. I hope that that's a silver lining that can come out. I hope this becomes more.
I'm into that.
Maybe more relevant. I'll just say quickly that I do have a YouTube channel called Core of Depth Healers. That's core like Peace Corps. That may be of interest to you all. It provides samples of especially therapists or healers who have translated their individual work to addressing social crises. So we have some samples of the experiential democracy dialogue. We have samples of Arnie Mandel and his world work, samples of William Doherty, who's a co-founder of Braver Angels, and his work. There's a whole variety.
Anxiety is a primal fear of difference.
Looks like somebody's already playing.
Sometimes to survive.
You're streaming live.
I don't know how I'm streaming live all of a sudden. That's the introduction to the channel anyway. And working with a wonderful graduate student, and we actually are beginning some podcasts with some of these people as well. So that's forthcoming. But John has a wonderful library, a growing library of the existential movement as well. Will be a resource for this. So yes, Libby, looks like, oh, you have to go. Okay. Take good care. So glad you were here.
Thank you, Libby.
So it looks like we've come to a close, and I deeply appreciate traveling with you on this very intimate journey. And again, as I've shared with John, John shared with me, we're still feeling the glow, the scent, the emotion of our dialogue partners, our demo partners earlier in their sharing, and also feeling that from you all too. And my hope is that you will carry this on in your own ways, and that it's helpful in addressing the tremendous challenges that we have right now in our society and in the world. And one step at a time.
Yeah.
This frankly is what gives me therapy when I watch the news. That at least I'm doing something. And maybe you all can feel that in your own ways, that you're doing something to try to shift things. Warmest wishes to you. John, did you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Kirk, for bringing the workshop or making it available for us as a group. It's been very, very profoundly impactful. So thank you so much for all the energy that you bring together, Kirk, so that it's possible. It's a lot of getting ready and holding throughout these 3 hours. So thank you. Thank you very much. And
thank you for providing the forum.
Yeah. Well, we're going to keep thinking about how we can continue to do the work. If anybody's got any ideas, reach out to us as well and email us. Thank you, Wesley, for taking care of the tech and making sure the rooms work so smoothly. And thank you, everyone, for the way we've been able to be present to each other, as you were saying, Kirk. And